Welcome to On the Move.
We're putting this class together here just to get people more educated on the Constitution and open up a dialogue on it. This isn't necessarily a class, it's a study group, so feel free if you have anything at all you want to say, let us know, and you can have the floor, and you can direct it wherever you want to go. As far as study plan and everything, Ben, he's one of the most knowledgeable guys I know on the Constitution, so he's going to basically guide the conversation and steer us in directions. And if you guys have something you want to say, let us know. So, again, this is Ben Philo. I'll let you introduce yourself, Ben.
Here's my name. A little background. I mean, there's only three faces that no judge, maybe also. So, graduated in '89, went into the Army right after high school, and started kind of forming a social awareness, consciousness kind of thing while I was in the Army. And when I got out of the military, I went to college, and that awareness thing started expanding as I started seeing things around me that was just like, it didn't make sense. It's like there's too much crap going on. And, there's an edit.
That's all right. That's good.
And I started, wondering, so there's got to be a common thread to all this stuff that I see going wrong in our country, in our state, communities, things like that. Eventually, I bumped into a book that started talking about the Federal Reserve, the monetary system. And how many people here are familiar with the lore of all that? Anybody not? Okay. So, the Federal Reserve is a collection of private banks, essentially, that our government uses as a credit card. They created that credit card in 1913. The Constitution doesn't authorize that. And, but as a result, we have, depending on who you talk to, between $17 trillion worth of debt or $100 trillion worth of debt with all the entitlements and stuff like that. And we are a nation that is on the verge of just total collapse economically, thanks to the Federal Reserve. So, having been introduced to that idea about the Federal Reserve, I started asking more questions about other things. Next thing you know, I've got 10 years under my belt, and I've been studying the Constitution, studying a lot of case law on all kinds of different subject areas. Citizenship, the different kinds of citizenship is one of the areas that I'm really interested in. So that's kind of a little bit of a background on me. Any questions? Before I get going here, there's some article mentioned. This book right here, these are some books up here you might want to take a look at if you feel like it. Write titles down if you want to check them out, or buy them online, or Powell's books, whatever. This guy here, I found at Powell's books for $6. And this is great. This is the entire Constitution, where each article's provision, point by point, every point is given a history. It lists the article and the history of what led to the article. And it moves on to the next article, the history of it. And so it's a really great teaching. It's really cool stuff. This is 1965. As far as, this should be in the schools. This should be 8th grade, 2nd grade, basic stuff. But this is a great place to start to just have a tutorial on every provision of the Constitution. Because I am not an authority on every provision of the Constitution. I'm still a student of this thing, so this is really helpful. This book right here is all of the original Founding Father documents. The letters back and forth, Federalist Papers, Anti-Federalist Papers, all that stuff is in one book. Got that for $1 at a garage sale. How's it for me to please with that? That's pretty cool. Oh, try it. And this is online all over the place. And so is this. I've seen it. Amazon, the usual. And this right here is from an organization called the Freedom Foundation here in Washington, Olympia. Anybody hear of it? This is a book that has the Washington State Constitution and the Federal Constitution in one book. So it's kind of cool. Good for keeping your learning resources consolidated. So all of these guys are kind of in the spirit of consolidating your resources in fewer and fewer books. So there's a lot of talk about, there's a word that's getting beat up a lot I've seen here recently, and it's the word sovereign. Anybody got an idea what sovereign is? Have you ever heard of sovereignty? You sound like you're pretty up to speed on that. Sovereignty is basically a word that means having possession of political self-determination and the capacity to wield it at your leisure. Up until the United States, our country was created, only kings had it, or the Vatican. We were the first time that sovereignty was placed into the hands of the people themselves through their state governments. And we achieved that by taking it away from the crown. First time it's ever happened. And so those people who did that fighting established themselves as independent nation states, established their own sovereignty. They were kings amongst themselves. And it is that thing called sovereignty that was the fountain for everything we have in the country. We created the Constitution as a result. We make treaties through our sovereignty. And it was the first treaty that we made with England that basically established that the king recognized us as being a sovereign power. And there's a lot of people these days that are trying to exert this new renaissance of sovereignty. And there's kind of a backlash in official circles about that sort of thing. I hear reports of police departments being on the lookout for people who call themselves sovereigns. Well, those police officers and all the people who are on the streets doing the dirty work are all products of the public education system. And when you go through school and you graduate, you don't learn much about the Constitution. Your status as a graduate doesn't really mean much when it comes to knowing the Constitution. So that's what we're here doing right now, is trying to regain some of what we didn't get. Citizenship is key to that. And I want to stop also here. If you guys, I don't want this to be a monologue. I'm kind of uncomfortable with monologues. I'd rather it be a round table kind of a thing. So if you guys got questions, or something you want to know about, I'm kind of stabbing in the dark because I don't know where everybody is or what they want to know. So if there's a question you have about something, throw it out there. Otherwise, I'm just kind of motoring along.
Okay.
So a lot of the things that get lost during our high school education is this notion that people do have power. Power rests within them. They are the source of the power. A lot of citizens go into adult life and you see them on the street when it comes to them walking up to their public officials. They have kind of a submissive posture to them because, wow, this is an official, this is a police officer, this is a senator. I gotta be like this. And it's like, no, you allow him to be there. It's your permission that allows him to take that office. He swore an oath of office to work for you. He's your employee. Remember that. And if we forget that, then that kind of demeanor is accepted and embraced by those who do work for us. And it makes them feel like, oh, yeah, I guess we are pretty much something around here.
I guess that kind of stuff would explain why we have like the elite political class that we are seeing nowadays, where they are able to pass laws that they're exempt from. And for example, just here in Washington State, we have police officers who are authorized to be on the telephone while they drive. But right after they are writing somebody a ticket for being on the telephone while they drive. So they're enforcing laws that they're exempt from. They're passing laws that they're exempt from, and they don't feel like they have the reason to be, under these laws. Just look at like Obamacare. They're able to subsidize almost 100% of the amount of money that they're increasing with the healthcare costs. They're not going to even see anything from it. But we're establishing, by allowing that, what you're saying, the submissiveness, we're establishing and just basically reiterating that they are an elite political class that is above the law. So we have to
allowing lawlessness, but that's psychology.
Exactly. So I'm sorry. Carry on.
And the word psychology is perfect. When the people do not possess the knowledge that they need to actually have power and exert it, then it comes down to their minds being governed by their emotions. If you don't have knowledge to make your decisions, then what fills that vacuum is your emotions and your instincts, and those things are not informed.
It's literal psychological. Literally.
Yeah, and without that knowledge as a shield, you can be led by the nose emotionally all day long, all year long, to support things that, if you read between the lines, are actually against your rights. And you just won't even think about it. You'll celebrate it the whole way through. And years down the road, you'll still be celebrating what a great job you did for voting in favor of that. You need to know this rule book, and this is the one I pack with me all the time. This is just kind of my little pocket buddy Constitution. It actually has the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. It's made by the Cato Institute. You guys can pass it around if you want to take a look at it. You've ever seen it? Do you have one?
I haven't seen it. I've seen it. Look for it. It's really cool. You can get all that in a little compact book.
Yeah.
It's probably pretty small, leather.
That's probably the third one I've been through. The binding is glue, and so if you use it a lot, the glue gives up and the pages start falling out. They're cheap enough. I got that for $5, I think,
Nice.
at the bookstore. And if you really get into this stuff, if you start reading things, you'll notice that case law, especially, case law is the work of legal historians, essentially. These judges are actually, they function for us as historians of the law. They actually go back into that Magna Carta times, if they need to dig up the original intent of what a law means today. And they'll provide you with that history in a really short opinion that you can read and go, oh wow, I had no idea. There's so much to be learned by reading case law. It's not this, well, some of it is pretty stodgy. They get pretty enthusiastic about their language. And that language is kind of infectious too, so it'll start sticking in your head and you'll start using it if you're not careful. But that case law is really important stuff for knowing what's what, especially case law that emerged closest in time to the founding era. And I plugged this book the last time. This is a book by John Marshall, about John Marshall. He's the first Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court. He was part of the Revolution. He was right there side by side with all the founders and what they were doing. He was part of the convention and all that. The very first justice, and his case law is still used as God today in the courts.
Does that case law from that era run mainly along the lines of common law? Is it based on that rather than?
I'm sure he touched on all forms of law in his tenure as Chief Justice. I mean, there's equity law, there's maritime law, there's the full gamut, common law, and so it all needs to be honed up on, especially the common law. Common law is the law that's supposed to govern how the law interfaces with us.
Basically natural.
So that's John Marshall is a good get. Whether it's that book or some other book that has a compilation of his cases, a lot of them are very important stuff to read for knowing the original intent of the Constitution. And How many people here understand that the Constitution is a contract? Okay. I'll put it out there real quickly. The Constitution has terms and conditions. It has people who signed on to it, and as such, they are parties to that agreement. They call it a social compact a lot of times, but if you look up a law, go to a law dictionary and look up the word compact, it basically says contract, and just lays out the elements of what that is. So compact and contract are basically the same thing. And as we know, a contract is legally binding. And the parties that become part of it, who consent to being a part of it, consent is fundamental to any contract. And being fully informed of all the terms and conditions. And so the people who signed on at that time could sign on to it because they did possess sovereign power. They were politically self-determined. They had already done that in the Revolutionary War. They were then therefore eligible to form their own contract with each other. And that is the contract of the Constitution. And so our relationship, theoretically speaking, constitutionally, is a contractual relationship. Our legal status is one of a contractual nature. And there's things that have happened in history that call into question whether that contract still exists for purposes of today. It's just a good idea just to get boned up on some of the basics about what the Constitution does. And Article 1, it talks about the legislative department. Article 2 talks about the executive department. 3 is the judicial department. And 4 is the article that describes the states' relationships to each other. We can go on down the track. Questions yet?
As far as the Constitution, one thing I always like to point out is the Constitution isn't actually what's giving us our rights. If you are saying, I have a constitutional right to do something, I mean that's accurate. We do have constitutional rights, but more importantly, those are human rights. Those are inherent rights. Those are rights that we have at birth. It wasn't given to us from the Constitution. It was given to us, or it was just something that we already had.
It wasn't given to you by the government.
Exactly. Humans actually have the innate rights, and no one can give them to us. The only thing that you can do as far as freedom and your rights is lose them to with or without your consent. So, but as far as I'm concerned, the Constitution did not actually give us any rights whatsoever. All it actually did was enumerate the rights that we already have in existence. So, by enumerate, I mean put them to numbers, or 1, 2, 3, 4, that kind of thing. So
Protection from government, from them being trampled on by government.
Exactly, but I mean
Built in on purpose.
exactly.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's all I always say. Inherent rights protected by the Constitution. That's what I always say.
Yeah.
Again, once you believe, whether or not you believe in God or not, it's irrelevant. But
Mhm.
the rights that we do have granted to us by the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, are granted by God, like I said, whether you believe or not by governments.
Well,
Very big
They're
difference.
natural.
yeah. And you can look at it as a human right, a God-given right, whatever. But the Constitution doesn't give you that at all. It just acknowledges that these rights do exist, and that the government shouldn't and contractually is obligated now not to affect your rights. And
He was talking about psychology and what they should teach us in school. That's number one. They should teach us that.
Mhm.
A lot of people I run into, including me before I got knowledge up, I never, I wouldn't have thought twice about it being an inherent right or birthright. I just would have thought, okay, whatever you say, whatever might be happening, okay, you're the boss, And so that's why we need to educate everyone about what it really is.
And that's the most of the point of what we're doing here today, is to try to try to educate ourselves so we can, and also inspire ourselves. I know, you were talking about how we needed to get out and like get doing stuff, because it's winter. This is one of those small things that we can do just to educate ourselves and maybe inspire somebody. I put this on the internet, and get more people inspired and get moving. They can do their own things, start their own groups. So.
Maybe so. Well, my screen looks like it just shrunk by half. I'm not sure. I'm borrowing this projector, so I'm on the fly. I'm not sure what to do about that. But he brought up rights, and that everybody's born with rights, and that's true. Everybody in the world is born with their rights fundamentally, human rights. But not all humans choose to exert them. Assert them and seize them for their own use. The difference between us and people around the rest of the world is that at one point in time, we did exactly that. And when we created this contract, this piece of paper that forms the law that defines our relationship with the people who are supposed to serve and protect our rights, at that time, there was only one kind of party to that contract: state citizens. They were the only people who existed physically on the land. And those people who created that contract didn't have a crystal ball. They couldn't invent this Constitution to provide for the rights of people who might come along in the future. All they knew was themselves and their own concerns, and they really had an emergency on their hands too, because things were falling apart too. And so when they created it, it was for them, and it says so in the language itself. Funny thing is the Constitution that they created did a couple of things. It has provisions in here that led to the creation of different kinds of citizens aside from themselves. I'm going to scroll down here and show you. So, Article 1, Section 8, what we're looking at here. And if it's shrunk and you can't make it out right now, it might be better to move closer because I'm not sure how to fix it. That's clearer there.
That's very clear.
Wish I had a laser pointer, darn it. Okay, so this is the powers of Congress, Article 1, Section 8. And you go down here to the very bottom. And it says right here, this highlighted spot is Clause 17. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17. Each place that starts with a to do something is a clause. So it says, to exercise exclusive legislation in all cases whatsoever over the district, over such district, not exceeding 10 square miles as may by a session of particular states and the executive Congress become the seat of the federal government. So here's a constitution providing for a patch of land that's 10 square miles that will become the seat of the federal government, i.e. office space. And the reason why this was put in was specifically because in 1783, under the Articles of Confederation, which was the first stab at doing this constitutional business, the Articles didn't quite make it, and there's some flaws in it. Congress didn't have a permanent place to do its thing. It went around the country and set up shop in several states, in different places. And 1783, they happened to be in Philadelphia. And there was a bunch of Revolutionary War soldiers that decided that they were upset enough about not getting paid for their work during the Revolution that they stormed Congress. They attacked Congress. Congress had to run away. They fled for their lives. And Congress first tried to get the state of Pennsylvania to call out the militia to put a stop to it. And Pennsylvania didn't do it. They wouldn't do it. And so that's why Congress had to run away. That is the reason why that's in there. That is for the purpose of allowing the federal government to protect itself. That 10 square mile piece of land is utterly and eternally federal in nature. You no residue of statehood whatsoever. Maryland and Pennsylvania are the two states that gave up pieces of their land to form that 10 square miles. And the people who were living there as state citizens, once it was handed over to the federal government, ceased to be state citizens. They were, from that point onward, federal citizens. Washington, D.C. license plates on the bottom says taxation without representation. And it's a constitutional result, because in order to be qualified to vote for a representative, you have to be a state citizen. That's a constitutional requirement. And so if you're not a state citizen, you aren't qualified to vote for your own representatives. But Congress, who is composed of state citizens, taxes you all day long because they can, because you're living in their office space. That is their fortress. And you wonder why gun laws are so harsh in D.C. Specifically because the history of D.C. is for the purpose of protecting Congress physically. And all you gotta do if you're upset about that is move 5 miles one way or the other and become a state citizen. Problem solved. So, all of this, are you anybody familiar with the Heller case? The DC versus Heller, it's a Supreme Court, recent Supreme Court gun case. Well, from what I've read of that case, it came from DC. There was a security guard, a police officer or security guard who wanted to keep his guns on when he was off the clock at home, and they wouldn't let him, so he sued. And for the very first time, as far as I know, the Supreme Court said, you're right, you have those rights, and they can't do that to you. That decision, as far as I can tell, dumped 200 plus years of case law precedents that said Congress can do what they want in D.C. on its head. Judicial activism. And it was basically catering to the political emotions of all this. But, and that's a dangerous thing. When you take something that's been established for 200 years and repeated one court after another over the decades, and all of a sudden you say, what's the point of having a constitution at all? There isn't. If it can just be whisked away like that, if there's nothing that's concrete and definable, you can just toss it out the can whenever the political winds blow the right way, then what's the point? There is no point. The Constitution is just ink on paper. So that is the creation of federal citizens right there. For people who live in D.C., they are federal citizens. The same thing goes, scroll down here to Article 4. Okay, right here. Congress shall have power to dispose of and make all needful rules and regulations respecting the territory or other property belonging to the United States. Guam, Puerto Rico, Virgin Islands, none of those places are states. They are territories. The people who live there, their rights are managed by Congress through that. Their courts are not formed under Article 3, which is the judicial part of the Constitution. They're formed under congressional powers. The courts there are literally created by a legislative power, not a judicial power under the Constitution. Congress manages everything for them. It creates their government for them until they have enough generations go along and they assimilate into the way we do things constitutionally. When that point arrives and they can prove themselves being able to jive with the rest of us here in the continental United States, that's when they can apply for admission into statehood. And they can write out their own constitution, have their own legislative bodies, and hey, look what we're doing over here, and Mom and Dad, we're doing a great job down here. I think we're ready to strike out on our own, become part of the club. And when they apply for citizenship, or statehood, I should say, when Congress admits them into the Union, boom, they are now a state. And the people who live there are no longer federal citizens. They become state citizens with the full-bloom protections and benefits of the Constitution like the rest of the states. D.C. is eternally messed up. You will never escape that condition in D.C. Even though the people who live there have been state citizen type people from the very beginning of the country. How many generations of people who lived in D.C. haven't figured it out yet, and they keep beating the drum about, hey, you can't do that to us. Well, we'll figure it out. We can, and
Don't live
it's
here.
right there. Don't live here. Go away. Shoot, this is office space. Okay, so I'm bringing these things up because a lot of the reason people come to things like this is because they feel like their rights are getting trampled on, and they're confused as to why. And they're wondering, the question is, how can they get away with doing that? That's not constitutional. That's not right. Well, if you read the case law that pertains to the territorial clauses, the territorial clause there's one case, if you want to write it down, it's called Downs versus Bidwell out of 1902, I think. It's part of a cluster of cases called the Insular cases. And it dealt with the taxation pros and cons with Puerto Rico. And the way the case came at the Supreme Court, the court decided that they were painted into a corner and they had to settle the issue of why the tax laws don't apply the same way in Puerto Rico as they do the United States, because those citizens down there are not similarly situated as state citizens. And they use the expression similarly situated a lot. They say, you only have the rights that you're eligible for amongst similarly situated people. So we don't have a uniformity of people in the law's eyes. We have a uniformity of people in spirit who think, man, I'm a human being. You got to respect it. You got to get off my and let me get on with life. That contract doesn't say that. The contract only said that for state citizens.
And that's where, like, you and I, we had a disagreement when we first met. I remember because I was talking about like the philosophy of the Constitution, and he was talking about the contract of the Constitution, and Ben opened my eyes to a lot of the stuff that we're talking about right now.
Yes, I realized that Adam Kokesh, I guess he's trying to get everyone armed at DC, and now I don't know the truth of what's going on with that plot of land. So I mean, he's out of.
You're gonna get hosed.
Yeah.
You're going to get hosed. Constitutionally, you're going to get hosed.
So, I mean, I don't support that issue, and before I didn't know. So.
Yeah, DC is set up specifically for federal autonomy.
Yeah, I see.
Okay, so we've been talking about the problems. How some people are, they come to, you guys come to these things, and I'm sure I'm the same way as you guys are probably. How are they getting away with this? What can we do? There has to be some solution to this, other than just accepting our fate that the government can basically blatantly disregard our rights. So as far as solution-oriented things, I know I've talked to you, Ben, about Article 5 of the Constitution. Article 5 of the Constitution. Whether or not you agree or disagree that the constitutional contract still is in existence, Article 5 states that in order to ratify a new amendment of the Constitution, you can either go through Congress or you can go through the state convention, and state representatives can come together and ratify a new amendment to the Constitution.
Yeah, there's
one thing that I recommend doing is that we come together and actually have a state convention, which has never been done before successfully. We've never been able to ratify a new amendment to the Constitution. I suggest that we we amend the Constitution or reaffirm the Constitution. That way, in a way that we would basically iterate that it's a human right, and we're clear and we're clarifying everything. And I don't know if any of you have read Mark Levin's Liberty Amendments, but he's got some good suggestions for new amendments to add to the Constitution. So. But that would be a good way that we could reaffirm our rights as human rights, and we could reestablish the Constitution in a new contract, a new binding legal contract. And if it's not legitimate anymore because of things in the past, how they've voided the contract basically, then we could renew it through this process. And also, it's more mainstream because it's actually in the Constitution. So it's a way that we can reestablish our sovereignty. Anyway.
Sorry, I got distracted.
It's all right.
This for some reason.
You were looking up Article 5, I'm pretty sure, of the Constitution.
The amendment process?
Yeah.
Well, we can look at that. Did you share any of it?
Well, I just paraphrased it, but you can read it right out of there so they can hear it.
Yeah. I'll bring it up so we can look at it for themselves.
Okay.
Hearing for me is kind of an inadequate mode of taking information in. I have to see it myself.
Yeah.
So there it is. Amendments. Congress, whenever 2/3 or both houses shall deem it necessary, shall propose amendments to this Constitution, or on the application of the legislatures of 2/3 of the several states, shall call a convention for proposing amendments, which in either case shall be valid to all intents and purposes as part of this Constitution when ratified by the legislatures of 3/4 of the several states, or by conventions in 3/4 thereof, as the one or the other mode of ratification may be proposed by Congress, provided that no amendment. Should I keep reading, or you guys got it? Okay, I'll keep reading. Provided that no amendment which may be made prior to the year 1808, that's the second place for that to be, shall in any manner affect the first and fourth clauses in the 9th section of the first article, and that no state without its consent shall be deprived of its equal suffrage in the Senate. Which is a really interesting sentence. And I'll highlight it. No state without its consent shall be deprived of its equal suffrage in the Senate. How many people realize that the Senate is basically the same thing as the House of Representatives for the state entities themselves? Okay, so that was part of the Great Compromise, is they were trying to figure out how to balance out the interests of the big states, the populous states, with the small states, to put them on equal par some way. Population-wise, the big states outclass the rest of them. So how can we equalize things for the little guys, the little states? The Senate. Every state gets 2 senators to represent the state itself in Congress. So for the states, the people of the states that have a lot of people, Congress has more representatives per that state in relation, in proportion to the smaller populous states. But in the Senate, everything's the same. Everybody gets 2 votes, basically. So, the original purpose of the Senate was to give the state entities themselves a voice, influence in federal Congress, in the federal legislature. And the people who voted those senators into those offices were literally the legislatures of those states. The people who occupied the offices of the states were the ones who voted that senator into his position to represent them as the state officials. It makes sense. You only serve those who vote you into position. The 17th Amendment came along in 1913. 1913 was a real messed up year. 1913 is when the Federal Reserve was created too.
Isn't that when they created the income tax too?
The IRS was created right along with it.
Yes.
Anyway, back to it. The 17th Amendment changed things so that the people who voted the federal senators into their positions were the people themselves instead of the state legislatures. So you literally had a redundancy of popular representation in Congress. The people voted for the representatives, the people voted for the senators. Well, if you only represent who votes for you, and those senators are now, as a result of the 17th Amendment, voted in by the people, then they're not representing state entity. So, with that, opens the door up for mischief. Because if you can corrupt the identity themselves of the people away from being state citizens into federal citizens, then all of a sudden, and this is just me musing on what I've read. I haven't seen like point-by-point confession to this effect yet myself, but the evidence stacks up so convincingly that way. I'm just going to put it out there as something to chew on. And so if the states are no longer present in Congress because of the 17th Amendment, and all you have left are these people down here in the states whose legal identity itself is being messed with through things like becoming federal citizens one way or the other, then if the people in those landscapes are being converted into federal citizens and the states have been taken out of the equation, does it start to make sense how it is that they're doing what they're doing to us, just in the willy-nilly fashion that they want to, and well enough to maintain enough of what people expect out of the Constitution to keep them from asking too many questions? Can they dial in their usurpation of us well enough to where we can't pick up on it through that kind of process? Is there anything that's cloudy about this proposal? Questions?
So what you're saying is the 17th Amendment opened it up for senators and representatives to kind of just have their own free will on what to represent.
Well, if
in a roundabout way.
the senators no longer represent an entity called the state, then what good does state sovereignty do? State sovereignty, it was the driving force, was the thing that allowed the Constitution to be created to begin with. It was the source of the federal Constitution, states.
So it just basically negates the sovereignty, just represents these people, which could cause things to be misrepresented.
It's really sketchy.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's a historical fact that state sovereignty is the thing that allowed the Constitution to come into being, and they, the states and their state sovereign people, created that Constitution for their interests, and they were the only ones around at the time. Okay, we got that nailed down. But if the 17th Amendment comes in and says that the people who are in the Senate no longer represent those state entities are not present in Congress. Their voices are silent. They no longer have influence. In theory, it's just logic. I'm just putting this logic.
Like you said, we're seeing some evidence of that. It's just basically those senators or representatives are having a say for everybody because they're sovereign.
So I'm kind of dishing out a little bit of Constitution theory and speculation on Constitution reality. The theory is that the states themselves have a place in Congress through the Senate. 17th Amendment sure shows a convincing sign that that doesn't exist anymore. And anyway, so I'm tempted to go down a track that's maybe a little deeper than we need to go. Let's go around.
Well, one of the things, can you bring that back up on the screen here? I'd actually like to read that section again that was highlighted. It says, let's see, no state without its consent shall be deprived of its equal suffrage in the Senate. So, for those who may not know, suffrage is actually your right to vote.
It is.
Your representation, basically, your right to vote. And I made a video last weekend, and it was a petition going around. It was a fake petition, just basically like a petition test, to see who would actually sign a petition that says "Help Obama End Suffrage in America." And I got signatures on that. It's on the YouTube channel. Feel free to check it out. But as far as relation to that, suffrage is your right to vote. So how is it possible, that they passed the 17th Amendment, which basically eliminated the state suffrage, their right to vote in the Senate? So in that they actually violated the Constitution. Am I right?
I've read about what allowed the 17th, what fomented the 17th Amendment, is that there was enough skullduggery going on amongst senators as a class of people, basically wielding their positional power in ways that they shouldn't have been, that the people lost their confidence in the relationship between the state legislatures and the senators that they elected. Basically, it was the 17th Amendment was kind of a vote of no confidence for the Senate's people being voted in by state legislators.
Okay.
And so the people basically said, in theory, it was the people who said, hey, enough of this stuff. We don't trust you guys anymore. We're going to be the ones voting our senators in from now on.
Okay.
But the backside result of that is
they lost suffrage. I mean, and that's what I'm saying, though, is that they actually passed an amendment of the Constitution going directly against Article 5, which states that they can't lose it. So, now we have the situation where it's double representation in Congress, where the Senate is elected both by the people and same with the House of Representatives. So, we did in fact actually lose state suffrage. And in doing that, we lost state sovereignty.
If state sovereignty exists, it is a condition that is confined in solitary confinement within the landscape of the states.
Mm-hmm.
It has no influence in Congress.
Yeah. Well, technically, though, Congress is influenced by us, because we are voting for them. But regardless, the federal government in general is all subject to the people's will. So, any illusion of power that they have over us is, in fact, just an illusion. We may be being governed here by coercion, but it's enforced by us. So, if people didn't enforce it, then there's no power, no legitimacy.
What's an example of say we have state sovereignty? We have our 2 elected senators and our representatives. What is an example of something that they would go up there and vote on that for the good of all the sovereign states that the central government would promote?
Okay. Well, one of the reasons why senators, the Senate side of things as a body, traditionally has been thought of as a body of people who are more wise. They're older. They have to be older to be a senator. You're more wise in the world's ways and educated, informed, and so your wisdom is trusted on the average more than a mere House of Representatives person. And part of that's reflected in the treaty power. Under the treaty powers, the President and the Senate both come together to create treaties on behalf of the United States. The House has no participation. And so the House, the Senate has to give its consent to a treaty that a president engages in the creation of in order for it to be so. And so, that's international affairs kind of stuff. That's the Senate's business.
Okay.
That's an example.
That makes sense. What would be something that like we have as a representative and all that get passed for the behalf of the sovereign states that would be carried out by the central government? They're supposed to protect their rights, help us. You know what I mean?
Throw that at me again. Maybe I didn't.
Like, obviously, we have a central government to protect our rights, and is that just from a foreign power?
Well,
Establish a foreign government.
we have a federal government. The state citizens created the federal government to protect us militarily from foreign invasions
Okay.
and to help put down insurrections in the states, things like that.
As far as the history that I've researched myself, and correct me if I'm wrong, maybe you know more, but the federal government was actually established to form a mutual protection pact between the states, as you were saying, to basically establish a standing army and to protect from foreign and domestic threats. But also one real problem that was happening before the centralization of the government was states were having trade disagreements. And the United States, before it was actually the United States, was actually almost about to fall apart. They needed a centralized leader or centralized form of government to basically pull everybody together and make trade agreements. So that's the second duty of the United States federal government, is to establish trade agreements between the states to encourage commerce. But because of those disagreements that they were having, it was actually getting to the point where they almost, people almost went their separate ways, and the states almost became their own countries. So, but that's what I was able to pick up anyway from my research. So.
You don't worry about psychology if you know what stuff says in the background.
Sweet.
It's all you.
One of the things you mentioned, I picked up on, was standing armies.
Mm-hmm.
The militia was for the purpose of land warfare. Let me type in standing in this. I put this into a Word document so I could do word searches. So I'm going to type in standing. Okay, so that's the only place for standing. How about armies? Raise and support armies. Article 1, Section 8, Paragraph 12. Okay, it says to raise, I mean to create.
Mm-hmm.
And you only create an army in response to something.
Okay. So
And once you raise it, support it for its purposes. It says, but no appropriation of money to that use shall be for a term longer than 2 years.
So what you're saying is the Constitution basically, no?
I'm not saying.
Okay, the Constitution is saying.
These are the words.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm just doing a word search.
So basically, we were never supposed to have an army for more than 2 years.
Well, you look at the next line. It says to provide and maintain a navy. So in those 2 lines, they explicitly use the word maintain for navy, for the navy.
Okay.
They chose not to use that in the line above for armies. It says to raise.
That's really interesting. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, obviously, you can protect the border basically with your arm or with your navy, and that buys you enough time to raise your army, and
Which is where the Second Amendment comes in.
2 years.
and that's okay. But all right, here's one question. I've heard a lot of people talk about, and this is one of those things that the media is and liberals are kind of twisting around. The way I read the Second Amendment, it's not only giving us the right to bear arms, but it's also making it a No?
There's no giving there.
Okay, well, yeah. I mean, recognizing our right to bear arms. I apologize. I broke my own rule. But it's not only recognizing our right to bear arms, but it's also recognizing the right of a militia. Is that? Would you say that's accurate?
It's recognizing the role, the constitutional role of a militia, and what other purposes is a militia for other than armed conflict.
So according to the Constitution, this is now blowing me away. Like I said, I'm still learning as I go. So but according to the Constitution, it's saying that the standing armies are unconstitutional if for more than 2 years. And I'm assuming there may be some kind of stipulation on there if there's like a war going on for longer than 2 years.
Just to be as a disclaimer, I haven't done enough studying on this particular thing here myself to stand here and be Mr. know-it-all on it. All I'm just saying is let's look at what the Constitution says.
Yeah.
And all I'm seeing is raise and support. Is there an amendment that changes that?
Yeah.
So there's lots of things that are just sitting there looking at us, and if we just raise our eyes across it, they'll sit there and look at us and go, do you see that in the world around you?
This is exactly what we were talking about, like how you can read like one paragraph in the Constitution and it can lead you down a rabbit hole that will take like years of research to study and figure out what exactly it meant. And not only are you researching in that one section, but now you have to research the entire Constitution to see, okay, is there anything else that may stipulate somewhere else that it grants the authority, to do that? Because just from reading this one paragraph now, it kind of twisted my world upside down. Now, according to that paragraph, the Constitution says that you're only allowed to have a standing army for 2 years, but you have to raise it first.
No appropriation of money, i.e., support, to that use shall be for a longer term. They capitalize the word term. I'm not sure why they pick certain words out of the text of this document to capitalize sometimes. But anyway, more than 2 years. And years, the word years is capitalized. Anyway, so those are the words. Money shall not be raised to support an army for more than 2 years.
It's crazy. There has to be something else. I'll dig into this some more on my own time.
Yeah,
and see
all of this stuff is a research project. Any of these little points that we brought up so far today, you guys can take any one of them, and if what I've said about it has only whetted your appetite to want to know more, or it doesn't sound right, you want to prove me wrong. Prove me wrong. I don't want to walk around.
That's awesome.
Flapping my gums and be wrong. And if I am, then I'm going to eat some serious crow. So I'm going to stand back on making conclusions. I'll make speculations, but I'll say if I'm making a speculation. And it's based on the evidence that I've seen. But until I see the proof of it, declaration of it, something like that, I'll be standoffish enough to say this is a speculation. Treaty.
Yeah, it'd be cool though if you guys want to do your own research and come back the next week or whatever. Feel free. You guys, if you've done research, you can have the floor. It's up to you guys. But I'm gonna look up this now because now this is kind of interesting me, and even the legitimacy of these standing armies that we have here. Obviously we've had armies for more than 2 years. So
something that caught my attention on the wording there. I'm an inspector, and words are very important. As far
what kind of inspector?
I work power plants all over the country.
Okay.
I get hired to make sure the contractors aren't being naughty. Anyway, I noticed the word shall. The word shall is very, very specific. It's not should.
It's
not
straightforward.
May. Shall is set in concrete.
It's a command.
That's correct. No deviation whatsoever. For instance, if the contract says you shall perform such and such work, that doesn't mean shorter than that. That means that's the minimum.
Yep.
Awesome.
Okay, I'm going to take if I can get this done in 2 minutes, I'm going to indulge showing you a couple of shalls that you'll find kind of interesting. So the Oregon Revised Statutes website. So if you go down here, just keep scrolling. Here's the laws themselves, like this. And what I'm going to show you. There we go. Volume 9, Education and Culture. Chapter 336. Everybody likes 336. Or they will. So, check this out. Oh, I'm sorry, I went back to the top. Conduct of schools generally. This is the Oregon chapter on the conduct of schools generally. And down here in the subtitles it says Education and Culture, Holidays, Special Observances, Required Courses of Study. Keep going. And we'll get down to the main body here. Dun, dun, dun. So check this guy out here. 057. Yeah, I just made it darker. Can you see the words? They're kind of fuzzy for me where I'm at. Are they? Can you make them out? I'll just stand over here and the short title is Courses in Constitution. Courses in Constitution and History of the United States. In all public schools, courses of instruction shall. Oh, that's the screen lit up.
I couldn't see it on the computer either.
Let me shrink this down, unfortunately.
I was trying to.
Oh, that's ridiculous. It's all right. So I'll just move it back and forth if I can. So, in all public schools, courses of instruction shall be given in the Constitution of the United States and in the history of the United States. These courses shall, number 1, begin not later than the opening of the 8th grade and shall continue in grades 9 through 12. What does that add up to?
Plain as day, actually.
Mm-hmm. And time-wise, that adds up to a minimum of 5 years of classes dedicated to the Constitution. Okay, so this is the law. And it uses the word shall 3 times in the midst of describing how much time we get to study the Constitution. We all know that the reality of the day, class, and I can confirm it from back to 1989, that ain't happening.
No way.
Right.
Not even a small percentage.
Right. Okay, so if those who are getting paid by us to operate the school system, you got to know that they get hired because they know something about education law, especially the curriculum planners. And so they're in those positions because they know something about curriculum laws. And here it is, plain as day, a minimum of 5 years. Then it goes down on number 2. It says, shall be required in all public universities, listed in 352.002. And when you look that up, it basically means all of the major state universities. Prior to this, it meant all of the universities, not just the major ones, all of them, except for OHSU. Originally, starting up until 77, I believe, history wasn't a part of this program. It was just the Constitution. Classes on the Constitution only. They only added history to that in 77. So, this law has been there since 1923. Yeah. Okay. Now I'll come down to the next law now, line. And it says, topics given special emphasis in Constitution. All right, what's that? It says, and this is 336.067. One, in public schools, special emphasis shall be given to instruction in, and there's a whole list of stuff here that is kind of fuzzy on how they're supposed to carry that out, but here's honesty, morality, courtesy. I mean, this is parental stuff. I personally don't understand that. But anyway, on with it. The next one is obedience to law. Special emphasis on obedience to law. And how can somebody graduate high school and know how to obey the law if they themselves don't know how to read it? Yeah. Okay, and then we keep going here, and look at this. Hey, under the special emphasis thing, there's the Constitution of the United States again. Right down the next two items down. And then directly after that is the Constitution of the state. Special emphasis. And what's the purpose of this? Why did they put these laws in here? Oh, that's down below. And it's at the bottom of A. No, I take that back. Yes, it's at the bottom of A. And I'll highlight it so you can see where I'm looking. Lessons that tend to promote and develop an upright and desirable citizenry. The legislature says we want to promote and develop an upright and desirable citizenry, and we're going to do it with these laws. Obedience to law, federal constitution, special emphasis, state constitution. And for the federal constitution, they straight up said what that means for this body of law is 5 years of a class on it, minimum. And if you go to college after high school, look forward to more of it. So Oregon is a beautiful poster child for, or it appears to be, a beautiful poster child for the agenda that's underlying our public school system. Because in Oregon, the law literally says that they're supposed to be doing something that we know, in fact, they're not, and haven't done for decades.
What is, how do you say this? Why are the school board members not being held accountable for not making this part of the curriculum?
I would imagine that they are graduates of public high school themselves.
But they're probably not aware of that they need to do that then.
Well, I've actually had an email conversation with the lady who's in charge at the state level of social sciences curriculum planning.
Okay.
And it took three back and forths with her before she conceded that her knowledge of 057. And it's because I screwed up. She was citing this other law, Chapter 329 law, that said, I started off by saying, what laws govern Constitution education? And she says, 329045, and a couple other things. I said, 329, I'll check that out, but okay, well, I want to know what you know about 336057. So I looked at that and I was going, well, I see this word rigorous to describe what kind of education that 329045 provides for, but I don't see any details here. So I answered back to, what does rigorous mean? And well, there's no definition for that. I said, oh, okay. So, and then I answered her back and I said, are there any other laws that pertain to Constitution education other than, and instead of writing 329.045, the one that she gave me, I said 336.045, and because I've just got it subconsciously in my head, and I put her down there and didn't even realize it, fired it off, and the next email she goes, well, there is this other law, 336.057, and she described it as dealing with civics. There is another law that deals with civics. Totally trying to dismiss and marginalize the whole purpose of that law. And a few more emails down the line, I asked her how much of an influence 057 plays in their planning. And she said, we, quote, quote, we, describing her colleagues, curriculum planning colleagues, said, we are well aware of 336.057. So she basically admitted that we know this law exists, which automatically infers that, okay, if you know it, then the fact that it's not being carried out can be nothing other than an intentional act. I didn't point that out because it's just in your face. It's understood.
Not to bring up a different subject, but it's directly related to this. Has anyone in here seen the movie Agenda, Grinding Down America? Anybody seen that movie? That's on Vimeo. You ever heard of Vimeo? Find that movie, watch what it says about who they've got in the school boards and what's going on with that. See the correlation to what he just talked about. It'll blow your mind. Okay? Because the people who are in the school boards, they say in this movie, I don't know if it's like very conspiracy, but they say they've been pretty much handpicked to kind of negate things like this. Something's going on because it ain't being done.
Well, the nice thing about these two laws are a very powerful tool. And I'm thinking that it could even be made use of by people in other states. Because I've actually looked to find whether Washington has an analogous version of this that does the same thing. It basically says the Constitution shall be taught in high school. Fill in the blank. Yeah. Totally loosey-goosey.
Here's your 1 hour course on the
Yeah,
Constitution.
yeah, hey, we're good, sign it off. So 5 minutes on the Bill of Rights, we're good. You guys are empowered now, get to it. I'll go be citizens. Have a nice day. And make a lot of money for us too while you're at it. So, this is a digression, but I think it's a fun digression. It's kind of an illustration in real time of what the history of our educational process has been compared to what the law, which is supposed to protect our rights and property and interests, the law created by the people who are our voices, and it's just not being taken care of. And then you look over here.
The way in that movie, it gives you guys all the names and it draws it out like a web. You've seen a web where it starts with one person and it shows everything. How it's all went down over the last 100 years. All the influential names that are involved in the college system and everything in America.
Is that on Roku?
It's on Vimeo or whatever. I got a little small.
Okay, so I just jumped over to the Oregon Constitution because I want to show you guys something. It's on the same website. I just went back a couple times and clicked on the link for the Oregon Constitution on the left-hand side. So it's one of the Bill of Rights. And go down here, it's Article 1, Section 22. Pretty straightforward. Suspension of operation of laws. The operation of the laws shall never be suspended except by the authority of the Legislative Assembly. Well, the fact that those laws are still there on the books shows that the Legislative Assembly has not suspended them. So here's the Oregon Constitution saying the people in the schools are bad. Because you're doing that. You're suspending our laws. And the fact is that the rule of law is the cornerstone of a republican form of government. It is the essential fabric of what the Constitution was created to put in place. The rule of law, not the rule of the will of man. So the law, that's why they're saying the law shall never be suspended. And they're just dumping it on its head. Okay, get back to this other good stuff. The U.S. Constitution. Here's that treaty business I was telling you about, the President and the Senate on treaty making. It's under Article 2. Right there. We'll go down here. Powers and duties of the President. And on the second paragraph, says, he, meaning the president, shall have power by and with the advice and consent of the Senate to make treaties, provided 2/3 of senators concur. So that's the provision. It's Article 1 or Article 2, Section 2, Paragraph 2. That says the senators are direct ingredients for treaty making. Necessary ingredients for treaty making. I'm in a position of probably having to get going pretty soon. Any questions?
I learned lots so far.
Cool. Cool. If you can write some of this stuff down, take little notes so you can get farther into it. And again, I'll replug this. This is a great book to continue on because there's a lot of articles that I'm just straight up not well read on at all, and I can't really speak to them. I'm getting closer, but it's a work in progress. One thing I do want to show you though.
I'll go ahead and I'm going to post this video on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/OnTheMoveShow. So if you guys want to have any of the books or whatever, I'll put a link in the description of this video. So if you want it, it'll be there.
So Article 1, Section 8, I'm going to talk about the money power, the constitutional money provisions. So Article 1, Section 8, powers of Congress again. It says here, Article 1, Section 8, Congress shall have power to, now here, to coin money, regulate the value thereof. Does it say print money? Oh.
So what's the legal definition of coin?
They didn't use the word print. And a big part of the reason why they didn't use the word print is because they hated the Continentals. The Continentals were fiat money that were used to pay for the Revolutionary War. As a wartime emergency, you got to do something. You got to supposedly pay. And now we know why the Revolutionary soldiers were so upset at the end of the Revolution. Hey, this ain't worth crap. I mean, don't believe.
That's okay. Crap's okay.
Crap's okay.
Yeah, we can say crap. That's fine.
Fiat just means made up, right?
Fiat is by the power of saying it so, it is so.
Yeah, it's made up.
I mean, it's just like anything that has value. I mean, whether we consider intrinsic or not. I mean, it's all fiat because it's all relative. Like, you know, gold is worth something because we say it's worth something.
Well, it also has intrinsic values as a metal. That is verified throughout the course of human history and across cultures.
But again, that's all because we perceive it to be worth something.
That's a fundamental human nature thing, and that's not ambiguous. It transcends time and cultures. You don't have to speak the tongue. If you've got gold in your hand, okay, we'll see what I do.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, no, and I agree. I mean, throughout history, it's always been worth something.
Right.
But it will always be worth something. I mean, it's never going to lose all its value, with the exception of like silver. I've heard something about like silver absorbs radiation. So if there's ever like nuclear fallout or something, silver may not be worth anything. So.
Heard that too.
Yeah, I mean, regardless, they'll always be worth something. But I mean, it's a metal, so it's worth as much as what we value it as a society. So, and just like the paper that you're holding, you know, we value it. I mean, it's really just paper. You know, I mean, technically like a paper cotton blend.
The one advantage that this stuff has, as long as you can take it to a bank, and here, I'll take my metal. And the bank says, oh, no problem, hold on a second. Clink, 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 there you go. Problem solved, no problem. Because you gotta know that carrying around a whole pocket load of change in your pocket is heavy.
Well,
You better have some suspenders.
Not necessarily though, because gold in and of itself is one of those things you can carry your whole life savings in a briefcase, you know?
Right,
So,
and it announces that to the world too.
yeah.
For people who are, into the larceny thing, or I said, oh, there's my next victim.
Yeah.
So this is quiet. This is stealthy money.
Yeah.
But also, in 29, the crash of 29, there was a time where you were to go cash in and get your gold, take your note in, and the banks shut their doors.
Mm-hmm.
You had no access.
Oh yeah. I mean, just like right now, I don't know if you guys have heard about it, but J.P. Morgan Chase, they just created a limit to how much money you can withdraw out of your bank account. So it doesn't it's kind of doing the same thing. They're establishing the same kind of setups to where if there is a crash, they can prevent you from getting your money out. Yeah.
Because all the money, just because it says you have $10,000 in your check register, if you go to the bank and try to get it out, doesn't mean it's there.
Yeah. Well, from what I understand, and I'm limited on my research on this, but from what I understand, from what I've researched, is they're only required to actually keep 10% of the money that they supposedly have. I think they call it fractional banking or something like that, where they're only required to actually keep 10% on hand. So if everybody came to get their money, they're 90% short. You know, they don't have that. All the rest of the money that they have is in investments and stuff that they can't quickly get to. So
Psychologically,
yeah.
it helps to know. So this is one of the money power provisions, and the next one is down here in section 10.
But by the way, I could be wrong on that. On the 10% number. So.
Probably right.
Okay. So.
Section 10 is regard to limitations upon powers of states. So the Constitution also directly limits the state, not just the federal government. And one of those limitations is no state, if you read that blue text, and you can't, I'll read it to you. No state shall make anything but gold and silver coin a tender in payment of debts. How many states do we have that are almost bankrupt?
I think all of them,
And the rest
except
of us
for
are
Wyoming,
on
maybe.
our way. That has never been amended. It's still looking at us. And so I'm wondering why the schools have a hard time teaching the Constitution. Because if they spent 5 years teaching the Constitution, eventually they wouldn't be able to avoid a student saying, "Hey, Mr. Smith, we're in this Article 1 business, and I was just kind of going forward. This is all interesting stuff. I just kind of skipped along through this language, and check this out. Hey, it says that no state shall make anything but gold and silver coins as a tender in payment of its debts." I've never seen a gold or silver coin. Do the states pay their debts with gold and silver? Mr. Smith sits there going, I didn't know that.
Can you imagine if they actually taught this stuff at school? Like the amount of, like we talk about rabbit holes, you'd start digging into it, and you can't help but see things that just stare you in the face, and you're like, wait a minute, this isn't right. This isn't what I see every day.
We wouldn't be in debt.
Yeah. Okay, sorry about that.
That would solve a couple problems. So yeah, just imagine the train wreck that would be for Angie sitting in the back of the room shouting out across the whole class saying, "Mr. Smith, wait a minute, look at this." And Mr. Smith, being a high school graduate himself, who also didn't get to read this, goes, and the whole class is sitting there looking at him like, waiting.
You'd have to have
I see it too, Mr. Smith. I see it too. Well, why? I've never seen gold and silver money. What does that look like? Mr. Smith is sitting there going, well, we're pretty close to the end of class anyway. Let's take a break. Recess. And he'd have to come back the next day. He'd have to spend the next 24 hours sweating bullets with the superintendent of the schools. Because, hey, why are we teaching this? Is this why we're not teaching the Constitution? Is this what it's all about? We're so far away from what the Constitution says that what we're supposed to be doing, that's the reason why we're not teaching it. You're trying to hide it, aren't you? Our history is a fraud, isn't it? And living a lie for decades, right? That's what's going on, right, Mr. Superintendent? Superintendents, I'm willing to cut them some slack also. I don't know if they're high up on the food chain to be in the know. I don't know. The curriculum planners, they know. They're influenced by people who call the shots.
What I talked about tonight.
Yeah, because, the conversation I had with the one down in Salem, there's no doubt in my mind, the questions I was asking her, that she was being evasive. She was just trying to dodge, and she said, hey, I'll have to pass your questions on to my legal expert person. And I said, okay, that's cool. I'll get a more authoritative answer. I'll hang out for that. And a couple weeks goes by, nothing. So, hey, I was checking in. I remember you saying, your legal person was going to get on that. What did they come up with? Oh, they're sick. Oh, okay, so, well, maybe you can ask the person who is filling in for them while they're sick. And she goes, oh, well, nobody fills in for them while they're gone. Oh, so basically legal issues just stay untended to while they're sick. She says, yeah, we got budget problems. We can only hire so many people. I said, okay, all right, I'll wait for them to get back. And when she finally says, when they finally got back, the answer she gave me as a result of that legal person getting back to her was basically, man, I really don't want to answer you.
I need a convoluted answer quick.
It was definitely not the answer that would come from somebody who knows the law or somebody who knows the law supports what they do.
Obedience to the law, like it says in the law.
So, anyway, some little windows of insight.
So if you want, I know you said you got to take off here. We can start wrapping it up.
Does anybody, before I put these away, does anybody want to write anything down?
Here, would you mind let me record the title here of everything? If you want to put it all down here, I'll just record the title.
Sure.
I'll link it at the bottom of this video here, so everybody can buy it if they want.
And I honestly don't know whether, how authoritative, how much value that book has for teaching the common law, which is what common law means. It's really specific. I grabbed just a few books off my shelf and I saw common